Welcome, everybody, to the 20th anniversary event of CASSE, the Center for the Advancement of the Steady State Economy. If you're not sure what that means, steady state economy, we should remind ourselves what economic growth is: increasing production and consumption of goods and services. And so that means a growing population and per capita consumption, and it's measured with GDP. So you have a growing economy, we recognize that as unsustainable. And likewise, so is a degrowing economy. Neither is sustainable in the long run. So the steady state economy is an economy of stabilized size. It's the sustainable alternative to growth or degrowth. Our mission at CASSE is to advance the steady state economy, and not just conceptually, but to advance the steady state economy as a policy goal with widespread public support. So a politically viable policy goal. And we're still working on it. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary today by virtue of the fact that the IRS recognized CASSE as a 501c3 nonprofit as of February 2nd, 2005. The roots of CASSE go back to the mid-90s. Some of our guests I see out there remember this. The political rhetoric in the 90s was there is no conflict between growing the economy and protecting the environment. That was very common at the highest political levels. And people like myself had started to focus precisely on the conflict between growing the economy and protecting the environment. And so we got some of the scientific professional societies like the Wildlife Society and American Fisheries Society and so on to engage in that topic. And that was tough sledding. Personally, I signed on with the U.S. government in 1999 in the headquarters of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And when I started to talk about the conflict between growth and conservation, soon enough, I became prohibited from talking about that. So that's why we have a CASSE. We got established right around that time. We developed a position statement to refute that political rhetoric that there's no conflict. Many of you are signatories. We sought and obtained the imprimatur of Herman Daly, the champion and grandfather, if you will, of steady state economics. And I think what I'll do is close the introductory segment here by quoting Herman Daly. We're very happy and proud to have this quote. Herman said around 2021, many NGOs deal with individual parts of our overall problem, such as climate, biodiversity loss, population, etc. But only CASSE tackles the total problem at its root of generalized overshoot by the human economy. CASSE deserves support. That's how he concluded his comment for us. And we're so grateful for that. We were sad when Herman passed away in October of 2022. But we're keeping it going for Herman and for people and planet, frankly. All right, now we'd like to go around and introduce our staff to everybody out there, and we're going to turn it over to Alex Underwood for this. Alex is our managing editor. I'll introduce her at least a little bit. Alex signed on with CASSE about 7 months ago as a research associate, and she did such a good job there. Her writing was excellent, and then we turned over little bits of editing for her to do, and she was great at that too. And then toward the end of 2024, we realized we needed a managing editor with the workload in our publications program. So we promoted Alex to managing editor, and she can tell you a little bit more about that and introduce the rest of our staff.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and your questions later on in the call. I am Alex. I'm from Indiana and currently based in the DC area. A little bit about my background, which is very interdisciplinary. I started off in environmental biology. That's what I got my undergrad in. And then from there have kind of transitioned to the social sciences. I did Peace Corps in Panama in the sustainable agriculture systems sector. I got a Master of Global Affairs at Notre Dame, focused on sustainable development and environmental policy. And it was there that I was introduced to ecological economics and thought, that is what I want to do. And so I'm so glad to be in this sphere now. And this is where I hope to stay for the rest of my career. Yeah, and as Brian said, when I started at CASSE, I was a research associate focused on the trophic theory of money. And now, as managing editor, I still get to write about that a little bit sometimes, and I do articles about once a month for the Steady State Herald. Hopefully, all of you are at least somewhat familiar with the Steady State Herald. That's our weekly blog. We publish a new article every Thursday morning. And those cover a broad range of topics, anything related to the steady state economy. And I'll just make a small plug right now that we always accept guest articles. Of course, cannot guarantee if or when they would be published, but I'm always excited to review and to learn people's insights. We actually have a guest article coming out this Thursday about higher education and the growth paradigm in higher education, so keep an eye out for that. And then I also work for the Steady State Press, our publishing imprint, but I'll cover that more a little bit later. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Rollo, who is our counties expert. He is our policy specialist that is focused on the Keep Our Counties Great program. Over to you, Dave.
Well, thank you, Alex, and great to see everybody. A little bit about myself. My professional background is in biology and laboratory research and microbiology at the university level. And I also spent about 15 years organic farming. I've spent 30 years serving on over a dozen boards and commissions at the city level. And I've served in elected office for the past 22 years as city council representative in Bloomington, Indiana. The mission of our Keep Our Counties Great campaign is to bring the steady state economy to the local level of county and municipal government. I work chiefly in three areas: on policy analysis, on development, and on communications. My policy analysis focuses on county government's guiding documents. Most important of these is the county's comprehensive plan, also referred to as the master plan of a city or county. This is the key document for directing private and public development, establishing the basis for zoning codes, guiding county infrastructure and the local economy. And here are briefly just a few things I've been working on. I've developed a steady state comprehensive plan template for use by county government as a model to use for their communities. I'm also establishing a database for the 3,200 or so counties in the US with key metrics for understanding them. I've been researching some of the best existing plans in the country, those comprehensive plans, and I feature some of these as case studies in the Steady State Herald articles that I compose. My contributions to the Steady State Herald also focus on growth battles at the local level, and there are many happening across the country. These are accounts of citizens and organizations that are pushing back against the growth machine. They are really good inspirational models for other counties to reproduce. Much of my role as policy specialists at CASSE is in communication. I'm researching these case studies. I reach out to citizen groups, local officials, planners, elected officials, conservation trusts, and public interest groups to investigate and report on the local scene. So I establish these contacts and relationships between CASSE and these individuals and groups. And finally, we have our Keep Our Counties Great team meeting once a month with CASSE members in various regions of the United States, including Vermont and New York, Idaho, Virginia, and California. And so I'll just conclude by saying that it's evident, as I think we all understand, that we have significant hurdles, especially now at the federal level, to overcome in our mission towards sustainability. And so it's all the more important to develop a steady state alternative at the local level. So please join us in keeping our counties great, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Now I'm going to kick it over to David Shreve, CASSE's senior economist, who actually started just yesterday at CASSE. So we give him a very warm welcome, and over to you, David.
Thank you, Alex. And I am very pleased to have started anew with CASSE. I came into contact with Brian and Cassie many years ago through my work in Albemarle County, Virginia, where I was part of a group called Advocates for a Sustainable Albemarle Population. And Brian worked very closely with us on a number of really important initiatives. And so even though I just started with CASSE, I feel like I've been around for a while and have long admired Brian's work and what they've done over the years. I completed my doctoral studies in economics and history at Louisiana State University in the 1990s. Unfortunately, it was a few years after Professor Daly had left the campus, so I didn't get to study directly under Herman at the time. I'm a former professor of economic history at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where I currently reside. Charlottesville is at the center of the area, surrounded by Albemarle County. I mentioned my connection with Albemarle County in the ASAP group. And I'm also part of the Keep Our Counties Great team at CASSE, and have been working with Dave Rollo on those endeavors for some time, and look forward to continuing that work. My principal job at CASSE, to help the team develop proposals for macroeconomic policy congruent with three things. The first would be an economic steady state to move us beyond, of course, a sophomoric reliance on growth and growth first policies. Two, full employment and broad economic opportunity and widespread prosperity. Well within reach in a steady state economy, but this is in some ways perhaps our biggest task ahead of us, is to convince people that the two are congruent. And so that's going to be a big part of my work, and I hope the work of others on the team. And then lastly, to define what Brian referred to as kind of a path to political success. We can't win this contest for ideas unless our ideas have broad appeal and we understand a pathway to political success. And as a longtime student of U.S. political history as well as economics, I think I look forward to contributing to that task. Beyond that, there's lots of detail and lots of fun things to discuss, but I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Thanks, David. Now I will kick it over to Kali Young, our development manager. Go ahead, Kali.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm CASSE's development manager since last May, and I started doing environmental policy work way back in 1997 on nuclear waste and energy issues in Texas. I have 20 years experience total in environmental and economic transformation work, including doing very successful grant writing as a program director of several organizations, and also being a fundraising director for several other nonprofits. I have a bachelor's in environmental studies and also a master's in social change and sustainability. And I'm really excited to work towards CASSE's mission of limiting growth as a key pillar of true sustainability. I think it's absolutely essential to preventing ecological collapse and social sustainability as well. I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Kali. And last but certainly not least, I will pass it over to Angela Durso, our executive assistant. Go ahead, Angela.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angela. I'm CASSE's executive assistant. and I'm native to the DC metro area, born and raised in Northern Virginia. I have a background in grassroots community development, nonprofit administration, and tax preparation. I received a BA in social psychology from Trinity, Washington, where I studied liberal arts. And I'm also a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Jamaica as a community environmental health and water sanitation volunteer working at the local health department in the parish of St. Thomas. Here at CASSE, I manage the administration program, and I take care of accounting, payroll, all things tax related. I also manage the inventory and distribution of all of our steady state press books, and I assist the team with all manners of administrative tasks, and as well, including our website, CRM, and sometimes I help with proofreading. I'm really proud to be a thought keeper of CASSE's longstanding body of work in this time where the integrity of information is so important. And just want to thank all of you for being here, and I appreciate all of your ongoing support of this work and your donations and staying abreast and following us. It means so much to us. Thank you, Alex.
Do we not have a fantastic staff? I mean, it's the 20th anniversary of CASSE, and we've never had a better rounded, more competent, more productive staff, and we're very blessed in that regard. And it's something to build around and build from. And so I hope we can keep doing that for a long time to come. I want to tell you just a little bit about some of the programs that our staff are involved in, and some of the bits and pieces of that have already come out. But basically, we have 7 main programs in CASSE: publications program, policy program, communications, research, internship, development, and administrative programs. And so most of these programs have one person associated with them at this time. The policy program, though, you could say has 2, our twin Daves on the twin tracks of the Steady State Economy Act at the federal level, and the Keep Our Counties Great campaign at the county level. And we love to emphasize that word keep, because we're not talking about making any county great again. These counties were all beautiful counties, the 3,000 some of them. We want to keep them great by keeping the bulldozer of GDP at bay to a reasonable extent, at least. Keep the beauty, not have so much noise, congestion, stress, stop signs, etc. So it's we honed in on those 2 projects in the policy program in the past 18 months or so, but we occasionally get involved in policy initiatives with other organizations at other levels. Our publications program, I think Alex has pretty well summarized that. She's going to elaborate a little bit in a few minutes about the Steady State Press, so I'll leave that to her. And Kali did likewise with the development program. Also will elaborate a bit. So I think what I'll do is talk a little bit about a couple of the programs that currently are vacant in terms of staffing. Our communications program, we have in the past had a pretty vigorous social media presence, and we had a weekly podcast, The Steady Stater, the same name as our quarterly newsletter that Alex manages, the Steady Stater podcast. It was pretty popular, and we produced almost 70 episodes. They still get traffic. We had a lot of great guests. We had Herman on twice. So it was a pretty good thing. We're going to try to get that going again when we can hire a communications specialist who has podcast production expertise. You may want to circulate that out there among your networks. our research program, we have, I feel, some special findings out there in the sustainability world, especially on two fronts. We have what we call the trophic theory of money. That, in a nutshell, is the theory that money originates via the agricultural surplus that frees the hands for the division of labor unto all the other economic activities out there. And the surplus, in fact, allowing for the exchanging of the goods and services from those freed hands that no longer have to toil in the dirt. So, on the other hand, what that tells us is to have a growing economy, you have to have a growing trophic base. That's a simple ecological term, the trophic base. And that means you are going to have more environmental impact as you attempt to grow the economy. Whether you succeed or not, frankly, if you're pulling out all the stops for GDP growth, you're going to have more and more environmental impact. We also have, I feel, made some real contributions to the debates about how much technological progress can do to help solve macro ecological problems. And we find that it turns out technological progress is pretty much linked at the hip with GDP growth based upon previous non-progressed, if you will, levels of technology. And therefore, you're like on a hamster wheel the whole time. You never quite resolve that problem. That's the research program. And our internship program is also a little bit in hiatus right now. At times, we've had 10 to 12 internships per semester for numbers of semesters in a row. Now we're a little more careful that we don't overburden ourselves with the administration of that. And then we have chapters and volunteers. I'm really happy to see chapter directors out there with us today. And we can, I'm sure that we're going to be talking with them during the discussion segment and afterwards. So that's, those are some of the main programs and projects that we have going at CASSE. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Alex, because not only does she want to tell you a little more about the Steady State Press, but she really wants to tell you about something you can see right back there, hot off the press. Go ahead, Alex.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so I can hopefully entice you all to reading some of our titles. So from CASSE's homepage, if you go to follow and then down to Steady State Press here in the drop-down menu, you can see all of our titles. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'll just briefly run through their titles. So we have a book called 2145, A Journey into the Future by Peter Seidel, and that is a climate fiction novel. We have The Best of the Daily News, which is selected essays from the Daily News, which is the Steady State Herald's predecessor. So some good articles in there from Herman Daly, from Brian, and from many others. Uncommon Sense by Peter Seidel as well, which is about the shortcomings of the human mind for handling big picture, long-term challenges. And then we have a book by our very own Brian Check called Supply Shock, Economic Growth at the Crossroads and the Steady State Solution. This is a foundational steady state economy book that I highly recommend. We have a book by our Paris chapter director, Mark Kramer, called If Thoreau Had a Bicycle, The Art of the Ride. And then another book by Brian called Gag Ordered No More, which is about his experience in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then, drum roll, I'm going to reveal our latest book, hot off the press, which is The Age of Humachines, Big Tech and the Battle for Humanity's Future. That's by Michael D.B. Harvey. And I felt honored to be able to read this as part of my job. It's a very well-researched, thorough overview of pretty much every topic related to big tech and the ways that it affects our society and the ways that it could affect us into the future. And it also presents some hopeful alternative pathways that humanity could take to avoid some of those worst effects, including steady state economy. And for any of these titles, if you click on the title, it'll take you to a page that shows more information. There's an overview and some reviews from readers. And we're proud to say that Humachines got a Kirkus star, which is a big honor. And then down at the bottom, you can order the book from our website or on Amazon, or you can become a member and get Humachines or any one of our titles for free. And then I will just briefly mention that we have another book by Max Kummerow that is kind of in progress. We haven't landed on a title. It's about population. And I see we already have some comments in the chat about population. So I know, you know, very, very important topic. We're thinking maybe titled Population Predicament, something like that. And with that, I will pass it over to Kali to talk about ways that you can get involved with CASSE.
Thank you. Yeah, so I see a lot of members out here already. I recognize your names and thank you for being a member. So CASSE's work only exists with your support. And so if you're not already a member, we would love for you to join as a member. It costs as little as $10 a year. You could also do $10 a month. We really appreciate recurring donations. And I think Alex is going to post in the chat the link for membership. And we do have members that donate up to $1,000 a year. Thank you so much for those donations. But even small donations speak really loudly to policymakers. And your recurring donations really help support our sustainable programs. If you do a $20 membership, you get a free book. So that's a little perk, including the Humachines book. And then I like to think of development holistically. So yeah, we always have a need for volunteers. And volunteers can help with any aspect of the organization. We also are still open to student interns, and they generally support our policy research, development, and advocacy, and sometimes write for the Herald as well, which is kind of exciting to get published. And then really excited to share about the CASSE chapters. I know some of the chapter leaders are here. And if you want to get more involved, we have 35 CASSE chapters already around the world. Some are more active than others, but they represent colleges, cities, counties, states, sometimes even small nations, as well as other ecological regions like watersheds. And the chapters help advance the steady state economy through outreach, education, and organizing in their local communities with the support of CASSE. They have a lot of latitude as to what they do, but we're happy to support them in their work. And the chapter leaders can meet regularly to share ideas and discuss progress and challenges. And if you want to join a chapter or start one, we can help you with that. And then there's the Keep Our Counties Great program, which Dave Rollo mentioned earlier. And Keep Our Counties Great is a core program of CASSE that implements the steady state economy through county comprehensive planning. If you want to bring Keep Our Counties Great to your county and help host us with connections to local government and organizations, you can contact Dave, and we'll post his information in the chat there. So just in general, we love to have you as part of our team of advocates, and we're really grateful for the support that you've already given. Thank you.
All right, well, good job, Kali and Alex. Those were great overviews of our programs and books. And now, you know, we're actually running a little bit ahead of time. We do have some questions identified. We're going to call on some people in just a minute. But you know what? I want to kind of interject here a big thank you to just about everybody on this call. I see a lot of names that have been such great friends and colleagues over the 20 years of CASSE. Man, I wish I could rattle them all off. There's Phil Lawn, Dan Svidarski, Andrew Rex, Vera Cole, Mike Hanauer, Jonathan. It goes on, and all these people, all you guys have done so much to help CASSE on so many different fronts. So This is a great event. I think we got to put this on YouTube. All right. How about some questions now? I'll probably try to parse these out and get some of our staff involved in answering. I may want to take a crack at the first one though, because being the person that's been with CASSE the whole 20 years, Mike Hanauer asked, what have we learned about what's effective over 20 years? And, we don't have any delusions that we've been super effective, but we have managed to get some things done that I think we're just starting to notice. And I recall Herman Daly himself telling us back in roughly 2015 or so, maybe a little bit earlier. That was after we had worked with a number of these professional scientific societies, the Wildlife Society, American Fisheries Society, Ecological Society of America, and several others, Society for Range Management, actually, American Society of Mammalogists, the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics, etc. And we had developed a unified position among these great organizations to refute that political rhetoric. And all of these positions really started with the CASSE position. And Herman Daly said, you know what, Brian, this is the most encouraging thing I've seen so far. Now, obviously, he wasn't talking about all of life. He was talking about pertaining to advancing the steady state economy. But that, I'll never forget that. And I've felt that it was a great honor to us and also puts the onus on us to keep it going. So yeah, the position taking efforts, Mike, I think have been effective. And I'll just give you one example of how I think that's the case. Here in the DC Beltway, you no longer hear the Big Ten environmental organizations being loud with the win-win rhetoric that there is no conflict between growing the economy and protecting the environment. Yes, you do still hear that at times. It's not nearly as loud, as obnoxious, I'm going to say, and as frequent as it was when. And I just can't help but to think that our work has had is some of the reason for that change. I would say there's a lot of other things that have been effective, but I don't want to monopolize the Q&A. So here we have a question from Loris Holmberg. How does CASSE and the issue of population growth jump into, I'm sorry, I should be asking the people. Loris, are you out there? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? If you're out there, your mute button should be down in the lower left, and just click on that. You might have had to leave. So we'll ask it for them. How does the issue of population growth, let's whittle it down to that. How does the issue of population growth jump into mainstream thought? And well, Dave, you've only been on a couple days, but you're our senior economist. Do you have any thoughts on how that happens? Dave Shreve, you have to unmute yourself.
I did put one thought in the chat, so I hope some of you had a chance to see that. And what I wrote there was population stabilization and reduction is essential. The good news here is that more and more peoples are instinctive and natural supporters of enhanced reproductive rights and population, quote unquote, control. And so our major task is to keep political leaders from discouraging this beneficial trend in the name of bad economic policy and bad economic theory, which is precisely what they're doing. So to me, that's an achievable task because you've got good policy on your side, and you've got a natural trend on your side. That makes it a little more winnable, I think, in my view. So that's my starting point. And it's easy, I think, as well for a smart economist to unravel the sort of crutch that population growth has become in economic policy making. It allows you to avoid difficult political contests about competing theories and about competing interests. So, you have to acknowledge all of that along the way. But acknowledging that, I think still the task is much simpler than we would imagine because of, what I wrote there.
Thanks, Dave. Terry, would you like to ask your question about political leadership?
Oh, go ahead and ask it for me, please. Thank you.
Okay. So Terry asks, are there any political leaders at the state or national level who privately or quietly support steady state economy? I think Dave Rollo would be able to take a crack at this one.
Well, I have met people who at the local level who are interested in this, and I think they have levels of freedom that maybe one doesn't have at higher levels of office. There are definitely comprehensive plans in various counties that aren't explicitly stating a steady state perspective, but are pretty congruent with that. And clearly, the representatives there are very judicious about growth or development and the type of growth or development that occurs, and they're trying to put constraints on it. So I think that is a great sign that there is a grassroots movement out there, and as citizens obviously experience the downside of growth, people become active and aware, and so I generally get a good response from people about CASSE when I contact them. They're interested in us. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does, and I'll add some actual names. The longtime Wisconsin Secretary of State was a CASSE signatory. That was Doug LaFollette of the famous Fightin' Bob LaFollette family, loosely at least. And we have had some state legislators who have signed the CASSE position. In Congress, the U.S. Congress, we don't have anyone that we're sure of is supportive, but we have a list of a dozen or so that we feel could very well be could very likely be supportive, at least once they're out of office. And then hopefully that starts to trickle chronologically into a place where we have some on Capitol Hill. Vera Cole, do you want to chime in here at all? You've been around a lot of politicians over the past half year or so, and I know your radar is always up for steady statesmanship. Have you met anybody out on the campaign trail? Vera herself narrowly missed a race in the state house in Pennsylvania.
Hi, Brian. Happy birthday, Cassie. 20 years. That's awesome. No, I would just say I was thinking during this discussion that I think there are a lot of leaders out there in various positions who aren't who don't say that they're for a steady state economy, but they don't talk about being pro-growth either. And I think just being not pro-growth is a real indication of getting it in terms of what's good for society and what's good for humanity. And I think that so by kind of quietly walking that line, they're in a position to support policies and support things without doing too much political damage to themselves, because it's just common sense. It just makes sense to people. And like your county's program addresses, people don't want the consequences of growth in their daily life, in their communities and their neighborhoods. And so it may sound like one thing when you read about it in the newspaper, or some politicians talking about it, but it's a whole nother thing when it hits your backyard. And so I think that there's, as a practical matter, there's a lot more people out there and leaders out there who get this. And it manifests just in them not being pro-growth in terms
Yeah.
of how they speak and where they take and the stance they take. That's what I would say.
That's a huge step in the right direction.
I think so.
Yeah. You know what? We have one of the world's top steady state economists in this call. Phil Lawn, I don't know where you are physically right now, but you posted a question and it's it sure is a big one right now. Why don't you go ahead and mention that and then we got to find out in the discussion later what you're up to these days. Oh, I'm not sure. Can you guys unmute yourselves? I thought everybody, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's a reasonably early in the morning here in Adelaide in Australia, so I had a late night doing some work on something, so I'm quite tired. I really should be in bed right now, but my question was, I've got to remember the question myself. I've got it here. Yeah, how will the election of Trump affect CASSE's work and promotion of the Steady State Economy Act?
Yeah, I'd like to take a crack at partially at least at that one. It's a real double-edged sword, of course, because we're at CASSE for the whole 20 years and we've been swimming straight upstream in the river of political economy. It's such a big, deep, wide, pro-growth river, and we're going straight against it. And with Trump in there, it's like that over Niagara Falls to boot. But I think that also affords us some opportunities because we're going to see that Trump is pulling out all the stops. There's the drill, baby, drill. There's the tariffs that in his mind are going to increase GDP. He's going to trash our regulatory framework, our federal government, a lot of our federal agencies, USAID, it looks like it's going to be one of the first victims. Health and Human Services, we have a lot of agencies in real trouble. And I think people are going to say to themselves, why is this happening? And we're going to help them recognize that one of the main reasons that it's not so much political ideology, it's that Trump is obsessed with growth, GDP growth. He stated that. You don't see news coverage of it much anymore, but he stated that right at the beginning of his first term. That was like his only real policy goal. So we've got to make hay while the sun shines in our publications program and our communications program, and we feel that the Democratic Party has to do the same thing. They have an opportunity. They lost big time, and they maybe want to think, all right, Trump's calling card is GDP growth. What if we start to say, wait a minute, maybe that's not such a great thing after all, with all of the costs to the environment, to our international relations, to our government structure, and so on. So that's an answer for you, Phil, and I guess we'll kind of play it by ear too. Jonathan Miller, a longtime CASSE friend and chapter director, you've got a question there you want to ask about alliances? I wonder if I need to.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I'm just curious how you see CASSE in a strategic sense in relation to the global wellbeing movement and degrowth movement. Do you see potential synergistic relationships there to increase the overall momentum we have in this direction?
Well, I know Kali was with the Wellbeing Alliance prior to coming to CASSE, and Kali, you want to take a crack at that?
I mean, I don't really work in the program areas, but I mean, there is quite a bit of overlap. I would say that there is one thing that, when Brian was bringing me on, he mentioned that while some of the folks in the well-being and donut spheres are very aware of like the growth problem and vocal about it, a lot of them are a little bit more measured about their critique, and so that makes it a little bit more challenging, but there is definitely a lot of overlap in alignment and goals. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the degrowth movement, I mean, we are part of, I would say, a big part of the degrowth movement, but we have encountered some controversy at times within the degrowth movement, partly because of sort of a misperception, I think, on the part of some of the degrowthers in Europe that we're very much capitalists. Because if you look at the work of Herman Daly, for example, he recognizes the validity of a market for certain types of goods and services, and that part gets overlooked. And they need to be rival and excludable goods and services, like your shoes and the coffee cup. Those are the market's great for allocating those kinds of things. But when it comes to things like environmental protection and our waterworks and national security, we have to have at least a mixed economy. A lot of degrowthers in Europe are Marxists and aren't necessarily very discerning, I feel, about when a market is appropriate for things. That's one thing. And then the whole cultural and political and economic history of Europe is so different than here in North America that it was not that difficult to predict that a degrowth movement would take better there than it has here. But now, we do have nascent degrowth groups in North America. We're going to be meeting with one right across the river here in DC next week. So we'll keep working on relations. Well, we've got some more questions out there. I think at this point it's 10 to 4. And if we're going to try to stay on schedule, we'll just open it up, and might be kind of interesting. You want to, plow in there if you feel really strongly that you have a question that should have been put out. We couldn't even keep up with all of them, so sorry about that. But you can do that now, and let's see how it goes. I don't think we have too much to lose. We're going to stop the recording at 4. I might butt in there toward 4 just to, make a closing comment, but then we'll stay around for further discussion.
I'd like to add a little more about population. I just was looking at some stuff.
Want to introduce yourself, Max?
Oh, sorry. I'm Max Coomer. I'm a retired business school professor, but my retirement hobby has been, for the last decade, has been going to ESA meetings and PAA meetings and trying to become a demographer and ecologist and writing a book about population. And I was just reading some stuff about how it's quite amazing how in the late 60s, early 70s, population was a consensus topic. LBJ said we should stop population growth. Nixon appointed a commission headed by a Rockefeller that said, let's stop US population growth. So population growth was not a controversial thing. And then Roe v. Wade came along and the Catholic Church started to pile on, and the anti-abortion people tried to make it toxic, and they picketed Warren Buffett and his foundation quit funding population fertility transition efforts. But USAID had a strong program for 20 years, and they helped countries like Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil get their fertility rates down. And whenever fertility rates came down, people got more prosperous and longer lives. So there's there's now been a sort of a natural experiment where the countries where women have less than 2 kids are so much better off than countries that where women still have 5 kids, that, you know, it makes a pretty clear demonstration. So by now, amazingly, 2/3 of the world is below replacement fertility. So were it not for Africa and a few fundamentalists in various religions around the world, we'd be headed toward population decline. But as it is, we're still growing at 80 million a year because the base has increased. So the growth rate went in half in the last 50 years, but the base doubled. So we're still growing 80 million a year. So it's still a problem to be solved, but it's one that seems to be headed in the right direction, as I think it was Dave pointed out. So the other thing I
Thanks,
want
Max.
to say, the other thing I want to say is that
Max,
there's
let's try to leave a lot of what you want to say for your book. So
Yeah,
people are going to buy your book.
I don't want to
instead of
give you the whole
catching
book, but
up.
I just wanted to mention one
Yeah.
other thing, which is that there was a very influential memo that everybody should read about how to win a battle of ideas. And it was written by Lewis Powell, who Nixon put on the Supreme Court a couple of months later. And Lewis Powell wrote it in 1971. It's available online. And he talks about, you know, taking over the universities, starting think tanks, like CASSE is an example, actually, on the right side. But there were like 800 right-wing think tanks came out of that. So it's not an accident that population got pushed off the world agenda, and to push it back on is going to take a lot of work.
Thanks, Max. You're a soldier that never quits on the population front. And, you know, you have a phenomenal book manuscript for us to help get out there for you in 25. So,
David Attenborough pointed out population drives everything else.
yeah. All right. Anybody else? You can.
Yeah, Brian, I'd
Thank-
like to ask you a question.
Who we have here?
Mike?
Oh, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like the organization in this domain that's had the most exposure is the donut economy and Kate Rayworth. And I'm wondering if there's any contact between CASSE and those people, a possible partnership, or maybe important differences between us.
Well, yeah. So they have a lot of momentum, in particularly in Netherlands, where Kate bases most of her work now. She's entrenched in the government there that seems to be taking the donut economy concept seriously. I was a little surprised at how much success they've had, because it adds a layer of complexity, you know, all the planetary limits involved, and you know, at the outer edge of the donut, plus adding the donut hole, which you don't want to fall into because you have little enough social benefits from an economy. So there's a lot to communicate, a lot to unpack from that donut model. We have, though, collaborated at times. She was a guest on our Steady Stater podcast. It's one of my favorite episodes, actually. And we wrote about it later. We actually produced a little video. I'll see if I can track down the link. It's rolling out the donut. And if you think about the hole and the outer circumference of that donut, that outer circumference, you roll out that donut into 2 lines, and the outer one becomes carrying capacity. It's a flat line on an X and Y axis, where the Y axis is size of the economy. That outer ring is carrying capacity, and that donut hole becomes a flat line. That's like the minimum acceptable GDP, you might say. So Kate was good with that. We you know what? Thanks for bringing that up. I think we're going to take another crack at rolling out the donut, and getting that around a little more. Let's see, anybody else have something for us? We just have a couple of minutes. Dan, you want to say anything about the Professional Natural Resource Society? Has there been much more in that regard in recent years?
Ryan, is there any commonality as far as a response from people that are into unlimited growth as opposed to a steady state? What do they consider the alternative?
I love that, the way you put that question. It is kind of a, okay, how are you going to answer that now, you perpetual growthers? But they do seem to have so far prevailed with the Romer model in the conventional textbooks of endogenous technological progress, and then the think tanks like the Club for Growth, they grab that and they say, oh, here, credentialed economists say this, so therefore there's no limit to growth. And that's we have a hired gun here, Dave Shreve, who's gonna little by little help put more chinks into that armor. And that's a work in progress. And Dan, I think we may come back to you at some point about how we can maybe get a little more traction from the credentials that come from the scientific professional societies to refute that win-win rhetoric. By the way, for everybody out there, Dan was the president of the Wildlife Society back around 2010-ish or so, and was a great friend of CASSE's, ally, and helped to get a TWS position adopted to refute the rhetoric. So thanks again, Dan. I think we're going to have to, if we're going to stick to our schedule, we'll have to stop the recording now. And once again, a huge thank you to everybody out there. I appreciate the comment I saw come up that we should do this again. I guess we should try to do that. I'm sure Kali will prompt us along the same lines. But for now, bye to the internet, and we'll turn this over to more of a private, informal discussion.